Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us as we take a look at Free League Publishing's newest RPG, Vaesen. This is a horror RPG based on Nordic mythology, in which you are Thursday's children, people who have been gifted with the sight, which allows you to see these spirits, monsters, creatures, and other different crypto creatures that have been roaming the countryside. Now, usually they're invisible, but recently they've been bumping heads with human society in the 19th century as industry has been growing. Now, this is a RPG review, not a board game review, so instead of our usual crits and misses, we're going to take a look at some different aspects. We're going to take a look at the book, the mechanics, and the overall lore and world of the RPG that it brings to the table.
In our experience with Vaesen, Will was our game master, whereas I was a player. So I did not get as much hands-on experience with the book itself. You want to keep me from all those secrets and spoilers that we might run into in the future. So how did you feel about the layout of the book and how it was presented?
Well, let's start off with the very easy one. That's quality. I really like this nice, I guess it's screen print, but it's not. It's got a nice texture to it, and same thing with the pages. The art is beautiful. Now, in terms of presenting the layout in the book, most of it is pretty good. The one problem I had with there are a couple sections where I'm like, I think I'm just gonna follow this table for character creation and stuff like that. I don't know how you could do that better, though. I mean, maybe it's just a me problem who's maybe not the most skilled at RPGs, but I really like a section that was just like, here is how you create your character. Here is where that they should do. There's a keyword or ability called advantage, and it wasn't until near the end that I understood that everyone got an advantage. I thought the party got one because they used the term you. So maybe just a chapter that's set up that would have been a little bit nice, but overall, when you read through, you get they introduce the rest of the information, I think, at the right pace.
It sounds like it's sort of like that stuff is integrated throughout as you're reading rather than being separated into a section where you can specifically look for it.
Right. And for me, I usually like this is the tutorial setup page because
right.
I need a little help.
Yeah. But based on, what I've seen with Free League's other books, they're usually pretty clear for the most part. That they usually have nice little helpful boxes that tell you about stuff. Did they include some of that kind of thing in this one?
Yes, in fact, a lot of the little boxes will help you with the lore stuff. So if you're reading about like how equipment works, they might put a little box and be like, well, this is the 19th century, so you should expect to see a train locomotive and stuff like that. So you can help remind you think, okay, that's the mindset I should be going in. Yeah, when I help design and build this world and get the characters and players as well, how they should be thinking when building their characters. And of course, if you do get lost and you're looking up something, there is a table on the back, which table contents, which is really easy to help look up a page and just be like, okay, I need to look up how does poison work again? Okay, go there. So it's not too hard to find what you need.
So this is the core rulebook for Vaesen. What exactly does it include in addition to the basic rules that you need to play?
Well, it includes a good chunk of monsters, or Vaesen, sorry, for you to use, and how they interact with the world, and I'll talk a little bit more about them later in the mechanics section. It also includes a little intro story, I guess you could call it, because it is very simple to use. It won't be too hard to grasp. You're not running around to a bunch of different places, which is very nice, especially I'm still a green GM. And it was not too hard for me to wrap my head around and make the scenario. And it tells you how to also like adjust it if you want to make multiple sessions and maybe a little bit shorter, which is also helpful. It does in there imply that this will actually chain into other books. So like it has plot hooks to continue on, but it does seem to be, it's not a simple one and done scenario. Let's move on to the mechanics though. This is from Free League Publishing, so it is using something akin to their Year Zero RPG rule set, meaning you're going to pretty much be using only 6-sided dice. However, if you've ever seen any of their other RPGs, maybe watch some of our streams, there are slight tweaks, whether if you have different dice for fear or whether ones matter. In this, it's simply sixes. That's all you care about. You're going to add your main stat, so let's say physique, as well as whatever the test is. So agility, force, or close combat all use physique. So you'd combine those two stats together. Meaning you could have a 0 in close combat, but still maybe a 2 in physique. So you have a chance to punch something. Not the greatest, but a chance.
Yeah, it's definitely simpler in that regard. There aren't critical fails. There are fails in general, but you don't have to worry about ones. All you care about is sixes, like you said. So it does make it a lot simpler, and I think potentially much friendlier to newer players. And it's just, more the higher your points are in the skill or attribute, the more dice you get. Very simple, very easy to pick up on in that regard. And same thing goes for the items. Of course, there's items that have special abilities, might have special magical uses, but many of them are generally just +1 bonus or +2 bonus when you're doing a certain thing, or if you can come up with a way to say something or use something in a conversation or in solving a puzzle or mystery, whatever it is. And that is a big part of this, is the mystery itself. I believe there are some combat. Of course, they mentioned combat, but
I mentioned close combat.
Yeah, so. but it's not really the focus of the game. Is much more about discovery of mysteries and trying to find creative ways to stop these creatures, because I think in most cases you're not just going to be able to go up there with an axe and whack at them.
Indeed, they say that right off the bat, that most blades and bullets don't really hurt the Vaesen. And that actually is a big part of this. This is horror. So the idea is it's less of like, oh, you can just be the hobo with a shotgun running around. A lot of these creatures require very weird, specific rituals. So usually you're going to have to set up the world in such a way that if they don't know what this Vaesen is yet, they haven't come across it. Like, how do I defeat this? Is this an angry spirit? Maybe we need to do something involving like the church and deal with crosses. Maybe we need to trick it somehow. There's some really weird integrated rituals in here. And that actually brings up, which is a double-edged sword, because I like that because it's not just combat. It's not just all right, I'm going to cast Fireball and win. You have to actually try to drop little clues for the players as the GM, and they're going to be interested to be like, oh, we can't kill this thing. How do we defeat it? I noticed it's staying away from the water. Maybe we need to cross a river, something like that. But it also means here that, because I went through and read through this book, I know how to beat all the monsters. So it's much harder, I think, to swap the GM and player. And obviously you could adjust it as you need. So maybe if we were to switch and John Tiggy's like, all right, you know how to defeat the mermaid, but now I'm going to make it so that isn't how you defeat mermaids. I'll make it so you need to, I don't know, play Catan with it or something.
Sure.
Really interesting rituals like that. So you can't always adjust it. And of course you can add your own monsters. And in fact, they suggest, like, if you're looking for monsters, here are some books you can look in, some areas if you want to add like Japanese mythology or something like that in there, which of course I'm going to go looking at other worlds and adding more spirits. That would be fantastic. But it is something to take into account, that it's not as simple to swap, I think.
Yeah, or even, once you get through the monsters in the book, like you said, without doing your own adjustments, it's not like D&D where you could just make a whole new campaign and sure, you've seen a dragon before, but it could be doing something different. That still could be the case here, but you have to be more
harder,
creative.
Yeah. Because it's, and also, the classic D&D monster is the troll that has that reacts with fire. And, it's one of those things where it's maybe a little bit easier to try to role play your way of not knowing it. It's much harder when that's literally the only way to kill this thing.
Right. Yeah, that's fair to say. But overall, I think, like I said, it's a very simple system in terms of how the mechanics actually work. It's even simpler than, I think it's the simplest of all the ones that we've played by them that are in this system.
Even in Tales from the Loop?
Yeah, Tales from the Loop, I feel like has some slightly weirder stuff going on. But of course, I was the GM when we played Tales from the Loop, so my perspective might be different. But I just felt like playing this one, it was just super smooth, pick up and play. All I had to think about was the role playing. Very not crunchy or fiddly. It was very straightforward and simple.
That is very true. I do say that we did sort of skip over one of the most I think complicated, but not bad complicated parts. Mostly just because it's not something you do in the first scenario, and that's upgrading your home base. In this world, you are part of or trying to restart the society, which is sort of like your X Files, your secret organization that's trying to stop everything. And you have a home base that was pretty much destroyed. So each session, you usually try to upgrade things depending on how rich people are and resources you've earned. And there's this thing with rolling dice and gathering, but it's not as complicated, I think, as year zero, which involves like you need to have people working on building there. You need to know the population of your place. You need specific resources and artifacts. So that one's a bit more complicated. This was much simpler on that front and still gives you that cool vibe of like, all right, we upgraded the place. We now have an occult library. We have an armory. So now we can have a better chance to get weapons, which is really cool. We should also mention, by the way, because we said combat isn't as big, you don't really have health points. What you have are conditions. There are physical and mental ones. You can hold up to 4 in each. Each one actually gives you a penalty in those kinds of stats. And you go over, you become broken. This is something that is shared among the year zero method, in which you need to then be pretty much healed. You're like, well, you're broken. You need to be dragged and taken out of there. You can be killed. And in fact, Jonathan, you guys were very close to dying on that in that RPG. If
Yeah.
you didn't ask about a window, I'll leave it at that because I don't want to spoil what happens in there. But
Yeah, so it is a horror RPG. So yeah, it's you should probably be prepared for the chance of death if you're not careful, I guess. The world of this game is one of the most interesting parts of it, I think. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it is the most interesting part of the game, being based, as we said, in Nordic horror mythology, which is not something that I am personally familiar with. And it's something that we always like to see when games delve into some kind of mythology that isn't something you've seen a million times, particularly in a game like this, where, as we said, a big part of it is solving these mysteries. So the fact that they are creatures we've never encountered before makes it different. This plays differently for people from that area of the world who grew up hearing about some of these creatures. It might be like hearing about a vampire for us. And I'm sure there's, variants of vampires and things in this book as well. But I find the world fascinating. It's very creepy. They have a lot of really cool art and designs of these different monsters. And it's a time period that is, I think, very fitting. It almost has this, we said it's a horror RPG, and it certainly is. But I feel like it also has a fairy tale-esque, I guess, like a Brothers Grimm kind of thing, which can be creepy, but also at the same time is lighthearted and fun.
I mean, it depends on how you tackle this as well, of course. I know I personally could see this easily going a bit more. I mean, it's still horrorish, but like Hellboy, where it's a bit more action in dealing with the stuff. And going to what you said about these monsters, I think part of it is because I have heard of some of these creatures, but because of usually hearing them in like D&D, where you're like, okay, it's just another weird thing for me to hit with a fireball, or a Magic the Gathering card where you're like, oh, it's just another 3/4 body. You have to think like, no, how did the people like back then think about these things like, oh, you can't just kill this thing. You need to cover it in silver and then walk backwards through 3 clover fields or something, which sounds really weird now, but like when you're in that world, you're thinking like, oh, this is just the ritual you need to do, and this is what I need to solve. And I like that a lot because it makes this much more of a puzzle and learning about the world than just a simple strength check.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fascinating to try to discover those things, and it means you're going to be doing a lot of investigating. It's very much about doing some detective work and talking to people. It's certainly a world that encourages more deeper role playing and learning more about your surroundings and your environment. And like you said, we have our own castle, at least in the story they set up in the book, and that just it gives you this great sense of place that you feel like, all right, I have an idea. Maybe it's a little. I never could quite nail down what the accent is supposed to be. So I avoided that. But you have a feel for the time period and the types of, what kinds of technologies around, what kind of people might be around. And for, it's a core rule book. There's not a ton of story content in there. I feel like it did a pretty good job making me feel immersed in the world.
How did you feel about that scenario as a player, the intro scenario that we went through? Did you feel it scratched some of those itches you were talking about? Did you feel actual horror? I mean, granted, this will depend on your GM, and that would be me, unfortunately.
No, yeah. I mean, your benefits or negatives aside, I did like that scenario. I think it was a perfect shorter scenario to get you an idea of what the world is like and how things work here. If my only complaint, which I think you could easily remedy, is I think it would really lend itself to being a little bit longer. I think there's definitely room for a GM to flesh it out and allow you to spend a little more time even in just that starter scenario and get a better feel for some of the characters. You could maybe work on some of the surrounding town more, stuff like that.
I did cut a little bit. You saw most of it, but I did make it a teeny bit shorter. But they do mention another town nearby, but they don't go into details about that town. It really focuses on this one location, this inn. That's not too spoiler. It's going to involve an inn, and I did accelerate some things a little bit. Part of it is because you guys did pretty good at allowing that acceleration to happen in terms of how you interacted with different people. And I liked it because of it. That is the one nice thing on the GM side. Because it didn't describe a whole town, I didn't have to think, all right, should I have them walk around the town first and find out clues there? It really was more of what's it called, like in a movie when you're in one set?
Like a closed room mystery.
It was more of a closed room mystery, which really takes a lot of pressure off the GM because they could focus more on how do I drop those clues around for what the Vaesen there is doing and maybe the backstory of the other people.
Is it closed room or closed door? I don't know. Either way, it's a mystery. Yeah, you had one location. It's like, here's your set pieces. Here's where everything is, and you can explore every nook and cranny. Yeah, I enjoyed that. So yeah, I would definitely say, the thing that makes this game stand out. I think the reason that you would buy Vaesen is because of the Vaesen, the monsters in the world.
I was completely going to say that. If you're a fan of monsters like I am, this is going to be an RPG you're going to like because it isn't just, let me throw blocks and numbers at my players. You really are going to tell the story with the monsters. It's important to find out what they are, what their attributes are, knowing how they exist in this world, so to speak. Like, if you look through the book, they actually have a secret text box for each of the monsters to be like, this is the big gimmick about them. This is how you can trick the players. They can't just simply cut down the tree, And I really like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, overall, I had a really good time playing Vaesen, and I would definitely be up for continuing more of it in the future.
You better.
I know there is a case book of some more mysteries that was on their Kickstarter page. I'm not sure if and when and how that's going to be available widely, but clearly they have more stuff planned to support it in the future. And again, it's very straightforward. I think this is a good intro book. If you are new to RPGs or you have players who are new to RPGs, it's much simpler than some of the more in-depth, nitty-gritty rules RPGs that you can find out there, and a really, really cool and unique theme. So I would definitely recommend checking it out if you're interested in the idea of that theme and that world.
Yeah, overall, it's definitely going to be one if you enjoy people who get, like you said, it is going to be scarier and you're usually going to involve dead bodies and spirits. So keep that in mind if you want someone who maybe wants something a bit more upbeat. This may not be the perfect scenario, or you're going to have to do some shifting around. As Jonathan said, right now, the core book is out as of this recording. We got a little DM screen here. There are some dice, but like we said, you only need 6-sided dice, so that's nothing to be as worried about. And there is a deck of cards, which include initiative, because the way initiative works is just drawing cards for people. And if you draw the 2 card, you're going to be second, third, so on and so forth. And it includes also some pictures of the monsters to show off, like, ooh, what's this creature? It's a kraken. You probably don't want to come across that. I don't think it'll end well.
Yeah, we try to avoid that. If you've had the chance to play Vaesen now that it's available, or if you are looking forward to it, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear if anybody is familiar with Nordic mythology. If maybe there's a creature you're excited to face off against when you play. Talk to us down there. But until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this has been Roll for Crit.
Thanks to all our members of our Patreon page for making this show possible. You can sign up for exclusive benefits or help us by liking and subscribing.
You can also take a quick survey to help us improve Roll for Crit, and in exchange, you'll receive access to a Patreon exclusive podcast episode. Stay up to date on all our Gen Con online coverage, including live gameplay at rollforcrit.com.